I gifted a brand new Mercedes to my head of creative and the heads of the agency that were running Honda and running Toyota. Nobody in Indian advertising had ever gone and rewarded key talent in quite the same way. Hindustan, Thompson, and that too at 35 Rani Jhansi Road. I think at that point of time, the University of Indian Advertising. Horlicks in those days was India's #1 brand on media spends. I won the largest ever pitch of my life, which was BPL. The only reason the agency existed was to create beautiful campaigns and great campaigns and whatever. But the flip side of it was the reason you never knew at the end of every month your salary would come in or not. 38, to be the CEO of India's largest listed media company, to be India's highest paid professional CEO for a listed company. I didn't have the money, so I was planning everything on scales which Dentsu was not even used to. So we started the company with 1 crore, so I had to put in 26 lakhs. In 3 years, we were India's 3rd largest agency. Mr. Nanda unfortunately fell very sick. So one day he called me and he said, you need to take over Rediffusion. And Rediffusion had been through some very bad years. After the big fallout between Martin Sorrell and Arun Nanda from 2008. So Ratan Tata entrusted the entire PR of the Tata business, which is 130 odd companies, to Mr. Nanda. For the first time, having worked for an entrepreneur at Zee, as a working professional, you sometimes ask yourself that some way, and I think most times is underrated, but in some way, the success of the entrepreneur is because of the contribution of the professionals who work for him.
Sandeep, welcome to Sell Side Conversations. It's a pleasure having you here.
Thank you. Thank you for coming by.
Thank you. Sandeep, let's sort of go into a little bit of a personal background. Can you just walk us through your beginnings, your childhood, your education?
Well, I'm a Chandigarh boy through and through. So school, college, both in Chandigarh. Parents were both in the government. My mother was an IAS officer. My dad was first batch BITS Pilani and went on to do his PhD in engineering and then was a chief engineer in the State Electricity Board. So, that usual phrase of saying I come from humble beginnings not applicable.
Okay.
So, and Chandigarh at the time when I was there was a beautiful city to grow up in. The total population of the city was under 2 lakhs. But here it had these absolutely mind-blowing facilities. So my school itself was in 33 acres.
Wonderful.
900 boys in 33 acres. So quality of education was absolutely fabulous. So both school and college were great fun. During my time, classmates I had have gone on to do phenomenally well. Phenomenally means really phenomenally well. So you had some great friends you made during that time and so on and so forth. But then, though I was personally quite focused on doing a
You think school had a big impact on you, your classmates? Do you think school had an impact on you, school and college?
Yeah, I think all these things matter. When you have a very bright set of, classmates, and each one of them is not just bright, but eclectic in their own way. So guys, even in that time in school, there were guys who knew more about birds, than most other people would. There were guys who would spend hours and days, looking at trees. Now, that's not the kind of stuff that kids usually do, right? Or we had, for example, the school shared a wall with the golf club. So there were guys who would finish school at 1:30 and by 2 o'clock they would already be on the golf course. So that's how the school produced actually. I can't count the number of IAS, IFS, IPS officers, the number of high court judges. And also the school has over the years produced guys like Dev Milkha Singh and, Yogaraj Singh, which is Yuvraj's father and so on and so forth. So a fabulous balance of both great academics, and lots of sports.
Oh, wonderful.
So, for years I didn't even know that schools didn't have football grounds that were separate from hockey grounds. So we had so much of space and so much of, luxury of growing up in what I would call very, very open environments. That made a lot of difference.
Absolutely.
Plus, the quality of education was absolutely fabulous. The amount of time and energy the teachers would spend. I come from a school called St. John's, so Christian Brothers School. The amount of time and energy that they would spend on you is something you can't even explain. Similarly, I went to what seems like a fairly high, low-profile kind of college, DAV College, Chandigarh. But that is the cradle of Kapil Dev, it's the cradle of, Ayushmann Khurrana and so on and so forth. But more importantly, I think the college has produced innumerable number of bureaucrats and diplomats, judges. I can't count the number of engineers and doctors who would have come from there.
So is it fair to say some of your success is owed to the part that you were in a very elite group of high achievers, thinkers?
See, let's be honest, they were not really elite. Over time, they've all done extremely well. There was nothing in Chandigarh that was elite. I went to school 5 kilometers going, 5 kilometers coming, then 5 kilometers for, sports in the afternoon. So 20 kilometers of cycling every day. And that was not just me, everybody. Whether you were rich or poor, you came from, an affluent or not so affluent background, lifestyles were very similar. So we were lucky by the time I was kind of getting out of college, Dad bought me a second-hand scooter. So, but you were delighted with that kind of elevation from cycle to, a second-hand scooter. But that was the normal lifestyle of everybody around. So, it's so simple. A movie ticket, a balcony movie ticket was 3 rupees. So we went and had a samosa, which was a big treat, 25 paisa. Life was cheap, but the quality of life in Chandigarh was of a very, very, very high order.
Wonderful.
But in any case, I actually was planning to go on from doing an English honors, which is what I did in college, doing a master's in English. But, life has its own ways. So I kind of meandered into doing an MBA and landed up at FMS Delhi.
Okay.
So the next 2 years were therefore at Delhi University.
Was doing English honors thought of strategy, or what was your thought process?
See, I told you, my mother was an IAS officer. So family thinking and otherwise too, I thought I would end up in the bureaucracy and join the government. I was extremely, extremely good at academics. I'm a gold medalist in English honors, school, college, everything. Academics was very high scores. So I never thought that getting into the IAS was going to be difficult. But God has its own ways. So
destiny.
Destiny plays its own role. So I never really sat the, UPSC exams, and so never really headed where I thought I was headed.
Wonderful. Sandeep, you were the salesman. You started out as a sales manager at Nerolac Paints. And how did that job come about? And how did what are the lessons that you learned in those initial formative years?
The job was basically, as is always true, your first placement out of management school. I had 2-3 options, including book bond and initial jobs in advertising and whatever. But the company that recruited me was actually a company called Forbes Soaps Campbell. And Forbes Soaps Campbell in those days used to be a part of the Tata Group. So theoretically, it was a Tata recruitment into a company called Forbes Soaps. And once they took you in, they would decide which company they would send you to.
Understood.
So I was allocated to Goodless Nerolac Paint. So in those days, you could have gone to Eureka Forbes, which had just opened, or Forbes Wines, which was a fairly big company in those days, and so on and so forth. But I got allocated to Nerolac, and that's how the paints career kind of started. So I spent 2 very, very, very interesting years at Nerolac. I was in Bombay, then I got rotated to Jaipur, Rajasthan, Then I spent a shortish stint in hometown Chandigarh, looking after Punjab, Haryana, Jammu Kashmir from Chandigarh. The interesting part of that journey was that first and foremost, I was not Mr. Sandeep Goyal, I was Sandeep Goyal Esquire. Because Goodless Nerolac, the Goodless part of it was actually Goodless Wall, which was a British company. So the company's, rituals and, the entire wiring of that company was very Brit. So Brit on one side and Tata's on the other, so very Brit. So from day one, I was a covenanted officer, so the salesman I was training under, because he would take me to the market, knew that a year from now I would be his boss. You understand? So that had its advantages and it had its own disadvantages. But, I have been practically to every single mandi and small town of Rajasthan.
Wow.
And I toured, Punjab in 1984, which is when I joined the company, at the peak of terrorism. So now the last bus would leave at 4 o'clock in the evening. If you missed that bus, you could not travel.
Oh my God.
Because those are the travel restrictions in those days. So in a scenario like that, your dealer who would otherwise keep, 2 months, 3 months stock was literally on just-in-time inventory. I mean, he would only indent to you when he needed the stuff because he didn't know whether the next day there would be a hartal or a band or something of that sort. So one lived and learned through very, very interesting times. Plus one advantage, which I mean, even now when youngsters come to me and I, chat, I said one of the advantages I had working for a paint company was that is one of the very few categories, at least in our times it was, where you worked retail because you had dealers, but you also worked a huge amount of industrial and institutional. So for example, I was lucky to be one amongst the first people to witness how a Maruti car was actually painted.
Oh, really?
Now that kind of technology did not, exist in India. So putting the car into a chamber and, the car is actually positive and the paint is actually negative and that's how the paint comes out. Nobody actually does it with, a gun or something of that sort. So those are interesting times. So you were handling dealers and retail on one side and you were doing this. And I've been, for example, to this absolutely back of beyond place called Pokhran.
Okay.
Which is where the nuclear blast happened. Why did I go to Pokhran? Because we were bidding for camouflage paint. There was a tender, and those days tenders were not electronic. I mean, you had to actually go and submit your documents and so on and so forth. So the sheer canvas of exposure that you got was very, very interesting. So in so many years, though I just spent 2 years in sales, I can even today carry on a fairly intelligent conversation with a client when it comes to distribution or, sales patterns or how is the retail behaving and so on and so forth. So very, very interesting stint, great company.
So you think those skills, the 2 years experience helped you in your career going forward into
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That kind of exposure, those foundational years work wonders. They work wonders. So if you've been lucky to have had some positive learnings at the very early stages of your career, I think the benefits kind of accrue to you over much longer periods of time.
Correct. After Nerolac Paints, you were in Hindustan Thompson. That was your first job in advertising, I believe. Can you just walk us through that journey? What did you learn over there?
Yeah, Hindustan Thompson, and that too at 35 Rani Jhansi Road, which is the Delhi legendary address. Was, I think, at that point of time, the University of Indian Advertising.
Okay.
It had some of the brightest people in Indian advertising under one roof. We were handling some of India's biggest, most famous brands. And Delhi was suddenly opening up as a market.
Any memorable brand you worked on as a young...
Yeah. The list is unending. I had the proud privilege of being part of the team that launched Maggi sauces.
Oh,
So
really?
Maggi noodles had been launched in 84, but 86 we were readying for the launch of Maggi sauces. So that was a fabulous experience, fabulous.
Just walk
I
us
mean,
through
one
that.
working with Nestle, two working with somebody of the eminence of Sangeeta Talwar, who was the group product manager at that time. And so Kanya Kripalu was then a very young management trainee, almost my batch and whatever. But, people like Ajay Banga, who's now the president of the World Bank, he was there. And my exposure and my understanding and my learnings on, say, Maggi sauces have stayed with me over the years. When I tell people my most complicated job I have ever done in advertising, this is 40 years now, is the neck label of the Maggi sauces bottle.
Oh, net label.
Neck label, neck.
Neck label, okay.
Neck label.
Okay, why is that?
Now you'd ask me, why is that? You see, today you have lots of computers and you have lots of tools and techniques and programs that can help you. But in those days, the fact that the neck of the bottle had an incline, it also had a curvature.
Yes.
So two things. One, you have an incline, and two, you have a curvature. Right? But when you see the label, you have to see in a manner that it still looks straight. So compensating for both the incline and the curvature and creating an artwork which normally used to be 16 times or 32 times bigger so that it could be reduced. And in those days, every single letter on the artwork had to be cut and pasted. I think we must have struggled with that artwork for 6 months, maybe 8 months.
6 months.
Yeah, way complicated, boss. That's what I'm trying to explain to you. I mean, the kind of talent you required, first as an art director and then as a paste of artist or as a studio manager, to figure out how to do that, not easy. So sometimes small jobs, granular assignments teach you more than maybe shooting big films. But the high point of my career actually in Thompson's was being assigned to Horlicks.
Okay.
Sorry. Horlicks in those days was India's number one brand on media spends. Number one brand.
Okay.
So the just sheer size of the assignment was mind-blowing. I mean, you
In today's
had...
terms, it will be pygmy sums, but just for our understanding, how much would that account be in media spends in those days?
I think we were spending close to 100 crores in those days, boss, which is a huge sum of money if you convert it into what it is today.
100 crores is even big now, but back in the day, I'm assuming it's...
I mean, really, Horlicks was a huge brand. I mean, I could be wrong. May not be 100 crores, may have been 75, 80 crores. But every single Doordarshan, sponsorship of Hindi feature film or Chitrahar we would take. Every big property that came onto the market, Horlicks would be, in the forefront. And as I used to laugh, I mean, it was a Jagmag brand. Jagmag brand मतलब आज तो उसके ऊपर जग का प्रमोशन है, कल को मग का प्रमोशन है, तो कोई ना कोई मार्केट में कुछ ना कुछ ऐसा हो ही रहा है. कभी उसमें चम्मच फ्री दे रहे हैं, कभी कुछ और दे रहे हैं. So there is constantly some kind of activity that is happening. So it is a brand that kept you on your toes literally 24/7 and 7 days a week. I mean, all this talk these days about 70 hours of work and people getting worked up and so on and so forth. Those conversations didn't exist, boss. One, of course, one was single. Two, you had no other diversions. You also, perhaps, the life balance stuff hadn't quite started. So those conversations didn't exist. So one be in office by 8:30 in the morning. And I rarely remember ever getting out before 10 in the night, maybe many days, 12 in the night. I mean, I had this partner of mine, Gulu Sen, who I used to work with. The days he and I were working at 2 o'clock in the morning. And bright and chirpy, you'd be back in the morning again on time for office and get started. So Horlicks was a great experience. More than that, I think Thompson's Delhi had some absolutely fabulously brilliant people working there. So my boss in Thompson, a gentleman called Sanjay Sehgal, who I worked for the 4 years that I was there, and who subsequently went off to Nestle and then has been in Switzerland for many years, for example, was a great teacher. I mean, every time you had a conversation with him, you learned something. And there was the great Dennis Joseph. I mean, he was the creative head over there. Then there was Neloy Sen, who was head of art and so on and so forth. So some incredibly very brilliant, outstanding people, which again, I mean, with the changing, things in advertising, I said those people were so brilliant, clients had no choice but to respect them, if not worship them. So Thompson was a great experience, 4 years, and I then moved on to this absolutely gorgeous agency called Trikaya Grey.
Oh, yes.
So Trikaya was everything that Thompson's wasn't, and Thompson's and Trikaya were like chalk and cheese. So Thompson's was all client servicing and account management and, this rapport with clients. And suddenly I came into Trikaya 2 years, working with Freddie Birdie and Naved Akhtar. And
in Delhi itself?
In Delhi itself. I moved to Bombay towards the end of my tenure, but it was very short innings, but basically Delhi. And Trikaya was all about creative. I mean, they lived for creative. So the difference was that Thompson's was into the business of creative.
Okay.
And Trikaya was into the creative of creative, if you understand. You understand? So the only reason the agency existed was to create campaigns. Beautiful campaigns and great campaigns and whatever. But the flip side of it was the reason, you never knew at the end of every month your salary would come in or not. And eventually the agency folded up also largely because they were great at producing great campaigns, but they didn't know how to run an agency. 2 great years there. Again, I worked on some fabulous brands, Kelvinator, HCL, very interesting brands, Bata. But most interesting part of that innings was working with Freddie and Navid.
Were you in account management in those days, or you were client servicing?
No, account management and client servicing meant the same thing. So you had some very, very bright guys there. Jackie Hathiramani, Mahesh Murthy. Those were some of the brightest minds of Indian advertising at that time. And then there was, of course, Alok Nanda here and Christopher Rosario, who one had great opportunity to interact with. And then the greatest out of all of them, Ravi Gupta himself, whom I had a fabulous rapport with. And so they were great advertising professionals, completely wrapped up in their own world. And I lasted 2 years. Yeah. I had come from that very Thompson's kind of background where most of your energies were focused on the client and client's requirements. The mood and the general atmosphere in Trikaya was that Trikaya existed for itself.
Give an example of that when you say Trikaya existed for itself. What do you exactly mean by that?
There's a very fine nuance. That nuance is that, for example, Freddie Birdie, who I think has been one of the geniuses of advertising, when he wrote a campaign, so that famous, line, the moving finger writes and having writ moves on. So Freddie wrote a line, the client dare not, and I'm using the word dare not, even ask for a comma to be added. You understand? Now, if a client servicing guy would even suggest that Freddie would look at, whatever he had created a second time, Freddie could kill. It was that kind of orientation, which, as I told you, is both good and bad. So, it works to a point. And for Trikaya also, it worked to a point. But beyond that, they just couldn't manage, because it's like saying that, this is what I'm saying, this is what works. And then if it doesn't work, then how do you turn around and say, well, why didn't it work? So you got to be very convinced and very, very clear and headed in your mind. Okay, this is what I'm recommending and this is what is going to work. Now in a Thompson like scenario, there was a lot of give and take. There was a lot of discussion. There were a lot of iterations. There were a lot of rounds of thinking, presentations, representations, standing your ground, arguing over it. To that extent, in Trikaya, it was largely a one-way street. I mean, this is it, boss. You take it or leave it.
Got it. And then you also were at Zee Telefilms, I believe, for a short stint. Then
Zee was much later. I mean, I went from Trikaya to a fabulous little agency called Interact. Interact was part of Mudra, set up by them because Mudra was now becoming a bigger agency. So smaller clients like Rasna or whatever local, they wanted their ambition was to go after Nestle. So the smaller local clients, they wanted to hive off and give to Interact. So that's the place where I launched Symphony air coolers.
okay,
I launched Move, the Rubefacient brand, and many sister brands of Move, including Crack and Decode and Set Wet, whatever. And of course, we created some really, really nice brands in Andrew Yule, which went into packaged tea, then a brand called Bhutan Board. A friend of mine, Jimmy Dorji, who is now more like family today after so many years. And many, many more interesting brands, including small retail brands like Meena Bazaar. Is today one of the biggest retailers of saris and salwar suits and whatever. So I worked on very small brands. But the joy there was that those brands looked up to me for help and advice. Now, I was barely into my early 30s. So at age 30, to have somebody 20 years, sometimes more, looking up to you for advice and actually following to the T whatever you said, put a different kind of onus onto you. And the good news is that, I handled those brands 35 years ago. And I was laughing at my daughter's wedding. Every one of those clients were there.
wonderful.
So those relationships have sustained. Many brands have gone out to become fabulously successful. And I look back with great satisfaction in those years of working at Interact.
But the world in those days was slightly different. It wasn't as competitive as today.
No. That's not clear. That's what is more competitive. In those days, in fact, you had no roads. No? You had to find your own paths. Today, brands at best are competing to be on the same autobahn. I am faster than you are. The days that we are talking about, when Move, for example, took on Iodex, there was only one Iodex, right? So the foresight of Narayan Bhai, the father of the gentleman called Darshan Bhai, who has launched this very successful brand called Fog, very close friend of mine. Now, the foresight of Narayan Bhai and his sons, including Darshan Bhai, to come up with a product like Move. Now, I'm taking that as an example. Problem with Iodex is Iodex works, but it dirties up your clothes when you apply it. Plus, Iodex was apply anywhere for pain relief. Iodex मलिए काम पे चलिए, कहीं भी लगेगा. To come up with a competitor to a category product which was 99% market share, first and foremost, that was colorless. So when you applied it, Move had no color. It came in a almost transparent, whitish kind of color. So didn't leave a mark. Plus to have the foresight that the maximum amount of pain is back pain. And therefore, I will concentrate my brand pitch to back pain and not just pain, was market development. So it is not that there was lesser competition or whatever. Numerical, things don't work. Just because you have 20 brands in the category doesn't mean there is more competition. You have one brand is 99% and you're going to up in, have a fight with him is 100 times more difficult.
Absolutely, yeah.
So similarly, the genesis of the brand Symphony air coolers. If you walk into any home, today things have changed a bit or whatever. If you walked into a home, the only capital asset you knew that existed was if you had a car or a scooter parked outside. But interestingly, there was one more thing that told you how affluent the family was, which is the air conditioner hanging out of the window, right?
So that was a mark
I don't know whether you have a refrigerator inside, you have a microwave, you have a washing machine, or you don't. But I know you have an air conditioner. And all you used to have was an air cooler. So what did Achal Vakeri do? Achal Vakeri was the man, Sanskrit Home Comforts in those days. I think companies changed to a different name today. Brand is the same. Took the air cooler Therefore, the cost economies and the value proposition of an air cooler and put it into a box that looked like an air conditioner.
Wow.
So when you went into somebody's home, you had a Symphony hanging out. It was actually an air cooler at say $1,500, $1,600 or $2,000. That's what it used to be in those days, as opposed to an air conditioner, which was maybe 10 times the amount. So it gave the family a sense of prestige.
It was a stroke of genius.
So you're creating a new category, boss. You're creating a new category. So marketing in those days was 10 times, if not 100 times more difficult than where we are today. I mean, I was referring to this brand, Bhutan Board. Chimi Dorji, Bhutanese gentleman,
Okay.
first came to see me and he showed me his product. And in India, it used to be called Bhusa board. Bhusa.
Busa.
You take wood shavings and make. But Chimi Dorji sitting in Bhutan, in a place in the middle of the mountains called Tala, set up a factory brought from a company called Simple Camp in Germany, which produced medium density fiber board for the first time in this country. Today, 90% of the furniture you buy is all MDF.
MDF, correct.
Now, challenges of that. You see, you cannot nail MDF. In India, carpenters were only used to using nails. So the concept of having an Allen key to put in a screw was completely new to this country. So he was the first guy to launch what was called DIY furniture in those days, right? Actually, the nomenclature used to be RTA, ready to assemble.
Oh,
Ready to assemble. DIY came much later. What was the challenge? Challenge was that he sent everything in a box. Nobody knew how to put it together. I mean, Indians are just not equal to putting things together. So you still needed a carpenter to come and fix the damn thing. Okay, he didn't have to cut it, chop it, and make it, but he still was needed to come and put it together. And he didn't know how to use the Allen key. Now, if he didn't know how to use the Allen key, you could not assemble the piece of furniture. Now, marketing those kind of products in those kind of, mindsets was, I think, far, far more difficult than what we are, looking at today. I mean, DIY, you don't have to explain it. Everybody knows what it is. So consumer knowledge has changed. Consumer awareness has changed. Penetration of categories has increased many folds. The challenges are different today. Challenges are more about, innovation. Challenges are more about distribution. Challenges are more about, speed to market. But the fundamental challenges of marketing were far, far, far more, 30, 35 years ago than where we are today.
so moving on, Sandeep, can you talk to us about your days at Rediffusion?
Well, the rediffusion journey started in 94. I was at Interact Vision, got headhunted by Diwan Arun Nanda. Diwan Arun Nanda was already a legend by that time. So it is more than anything else, wanting to work with the legendary Mr. Nanda. And as it is, in my growing up years, Rediffusion had been the hottest creative agency of this country. So I moved to Rediffusion, but in an assignment which was for a change, not P&L. So I was brought in really to head up new business.
Okay.
And sometimes you're at the right place, at the right time, in the right job. And the first big pitch that came my way was a small little brand called Bharti.
Okay.
And Bharti had just got their, what was those days called a cellular license, and had been given Delhi as their circle. And Sunil Bharti Mittal and Rajan Bharti Mittal were launching Bharti's mobile business. So we pitched. We were lucky to win the pitch. We also pitched because that was another simultaneous pitch for them called Casio Pagers.
Okay.
And I honestly, frankly, and I've written about that in my book, Dum Dum Bullet, I thought, Casio is Casio. This Bharti stuff is all going to be nothing. But as it turned out, Pagers died. Casio didn't make much headway. But Bharti, we gave birth to a brand called Airtel. And the rest, as they say, is history. So I had this unique opportunity to work alongside Sunil and Rajan from 94 to 2001, so about 8 years, right? And the learnings of building Airtel as a brand are just not replicable. I mean, you cannot ever repeat that experience.
Can you share a few learnings?
Well, I mean, one, there was no category. I mean, I'll tell you, research, for example, done by the government before putting out the cellular licenses had said that mobile market in India would reach 1 million customers in 10 years. 1 million customers in 10 years. I mean, Bharti did that in the first year. I mean, every other operator, whatever. So, whoever out of those big four or big five, as they used to be those days, did the research, and basis which the tenders were given out, and then in subsequent years you had all these problems on valuation of airwaves and so on and so forth, because somebody somewhere was actually doing the calculation at 1 million people in 10 years. So they got it horribly wrong.
Correct.
The good thing is that the operators who came in did not plan networks for 1 million people in 10 years. I mean, the pace at which Sunil Mittal built that business, built that brand, the kind of innovations that came in. I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day, he was talking about a loyalty program and something. So I said, Sunil Mittal called me one day and said, we're soon going to start monetization. So we need to work on a campaign on numbers. So numbers? Numbers mein kya hota hai? So he looked at me, he said, boss, you realize you can have a number which is 98100 Sunil, SUNIL, 5 digits. 98100 Goyal, GOYAL. Yes. Now, this is the only time in history when you can buy a number which is 98100 Sunil.
Wow.
So, we should be selling premium numbers. Now, honestly, even as an advertising guy, I hadn't thought of it. Sunil Mittal thought of it. So, when we started to market the numbers, you'd be surprised. Actually, you shouldn't be surprised. In India, I mean, having a prestige number plate or whatever has always been such a big thing. So, in the earlier regime, when you had, your regular POTS, which is the plain old telephone system, those opportunities were not there. But coming in of the new economy brought you suddenly so many more opportunities, right? So they were, I mean, Airtel is many case studies multiplied exponentially. So the 8 years I worked on Airtel has been the most superlative personal, professional experience, both from the category, the product, the brand, and most importantly, the promoters. Now, coincidentally, we actually had a client in Rediffusion at that time, and the brand was called Maruti Suzuki.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Now, Rediffusion in 1982 had actually created the wings logo that you see behind every Maruti.
Okay.
And 84, Rediffusion had launched the Maruti. But from the day it was launched, the Maruti was always on waitlist. So they didn't need to advertise. So theoretically had us as an advertising agency, but they never needed to advertise. Well, all products were on waitlist.
Correct.
Now, 1994, when I joined Rediffusion and went to see a gentleman called Jagdish Khattar, who had just been moved from the government to Maruti, and he was the chief marketing officer, knew nothing about marketing, but perhaps one of the most brilliant, marketing stroke branding people I have ever worked with. The environment in the car market was changing. CLO had just come in, Ford had just announced entry, Opel was coming in, Hyundai was coming in. So suddenly, Maruti had started to feel the heat. Not that they're all come in and taken away market share, but the same companies were suddenly eyeing their dealers, they were looking their service points, they were taking away their employees. So even if the battle in the marketplace had not started, the battle in the category had already started. So Maruti started to advertise. Now imagine Airtel starting to advertise,
and
Maruti starting to advertise. So as I told you, if you're in the right place at the right time, in the right job. So my own personal career took off at a completely different trajectory on the strength of these two brands. Because both brands were suddenly doing so fabulously well, spending so much money in advertising. We were building bigger and bigger teams for them. So in 97, Mr.
Those
Nanda,
were boom days.
so Mr. Nanda chose me in 97 to move to Bombay. But it was like a double, triple promotion. I moved from being head of Delhi to not being head of Bombay, which was a much larger branch, but as president of the agency.
Oh, wow.
So at 35, I was president of Rediffusion. Moved to Bombay and well, have been here ever since. But again, Bombay was a great opportunity. I started to work on Colgate Palmolive. We built up a whole new office in Chennai for Citibank, who moved. We opened up the loyalty practice for Ford, which was a large customer of Wonderman. So we launched Wonderman in India. And then I won the largest ever pitch of my life, which was BPL. So BPL in Bangalore was the number one, brand for consumer electronics and home appliances. And they had a 16 agency pitch.
Okay.
And we not only won the pitch, but we won the entire business, the entire, branding business of BPL.
What kind of preparation went behind that pitch?
Well, if you read my book, The Dum Dum Bullet, I have a full chapter on that. I had decided we were going to win this pitch, whatever it took. So first I went to see the client and I told him, boss, I have a request. So he said, what is it? I said, you've given us 2 hours to present and that's insufficient. This is brand BPL. It's so huge, so large, so he said, therefore, we'll give you more, 1 more hour you want. I said, no, I need 8 hours.
Oh.
So he fell off the chair. He said, are you crazy? We got to 8 hours, means asking my promoters for 8 hours. Impossible. So I said, boss, you got a brand, which is at stake. You have to make the time. So it took a little bit of time and effort. But I finally managed to convince him. So he said, okay, you have 8 hours to make a pitch. So I came back to Bombay and I actually created 8 agencies. 8 agencies. So a team of a copywriter and an art director with a client servicing guy managing them. So the agency got broken up into 8 parts. So it's not just 8 teams, but you are physically and conceptually a different agency. So don't look at yourself as Rediffusion A and B, but Rediffusion, Venus versus Rediffusion Mars. So you're competing against each other. So we went in to the pitch and I did one more small little tweak, which is that there's a very famous guy you would know called Harsha Bhogle.
Oh, yes.
And he's an alumnus of Rediffusion. First job after I am Ahmedabad, Rediffusion. Now, I never worked with him, but I had been introduced to him, found him an absolutely great guy. So I went up to him, requested him that can you come and anchor our pitch? So he said, how do you anchor a pitch? I said, you know everything, don't worry, I'll tell you what has to be done. So he would actually stand up after one team had presented, conclude what they had said, and introduce the next, agency that was coming in to present.
Just to clarify, Sandeep, these 8 constituents of Rediffusion were presenting 8 different ideas to the clients?
Boss, they were not just presenting 8 different ideas. It is like 8 different agencies presenting maybe multiple campaigns. My idea is BPL should be seen as something or the other. So I take that idea and I got 1, 2, 3, 4 different. So in 1 hour, you could have had that particular group present 4 different ideas on their perspective of what the brand was all about.
So what was the rationale behind that?
Boss, the rationale behind it was very simple. There were other 8 agencies outside. We were equal to those 8 agencies. By the time we finished an 8-hour pitch, we had presented maybe 1,000 pieces of creative. 1,000 pieces of creative. No other agency had a chance. It was not just the volume of work. It was the volume of thinking and the number of perspectives from which we had looked at the brand. The client was completely overwhelmed. He didn't know which way to look.
So this is like a typical guerrilla marketing tactic where you just sort of went
in guerrilla marketing, but we also must understand it took a phenomenal amount of effort to put something like that together.
But it was a stroke of genius that you outdid all your competitors in a way that.
No, that was in itself a strategy.
Yeah,
The
so
fact
that is the
that
strategy.
the other guy is going to present for 2 hours, I'm going to present for 8 hours, and I'm going to present research, and I'm going to present. There was a team, for example, which said, let's look at, I'm going to present a campaign to you, and ask yourself whether it will work in your strongest market, and whether it will work in your weakest market. So if the strongest market was, say, Karnataka and Bangalore, the presentation was actually made in Kannada. So this is your campaign in Kannada. And your weakest market is Odisha, so I'm going to show you a campaign in Odia and tell you what are the subtle differences between the two markets, between the two consumers, and the kind of product range that also you are selling in these two markets. So it is not just an advertising presentation. It was a presentation that went down to the nuts and bolts. So BPL was by far the biggest pitch I have ever won. So Rediffusion was a fabulous, 8 years.
Wow, this is quite an example. You should go into marketing tactics or business strategy tactics, or to sort of to win a new business. You sort of outflank, outmaneuver
when
everybody
you're
else.
that young and you're that hungry, right? And you have the fullest management support. Vidwan Arun Nanda, he would never ask me what I was doing. So he knew whatever I was doing my best. And the best most times was good enough to win.
Super. This is quite an example over here. And after Rediffusion?
Well, then I moved to Zee.
Okay.
So two years of being in media. I was Group CEO. I had everything from the general entertainment channel to the movie channel to the music channel to the news channel to all of those what used to be called alpha channels in those days, which were the regional channels. And of course, all our global feed and our distribution arms, which were City Cable and whatever. And then our joint ventures overseas, which included MGM and whatever. And we had the entire cricket in those days. We had a company called Buddha Telefilms. And so we were marketing all of the cricket for Doordarshan. And last but not the least, we had a very big film business. We produced Gadar while I was at Zee. So it was a very large portfolio, a very interesting portfolio. I was all of 38. Today people scale success much earlier. But in those days, to be 38, to be the CEO of India's largest listed media company, to be India's highest paid professional CEO for a listed company, and to have this kind of portfolio where you were interacting with LK Advani to Shah Rukh Khan to Sachin Tendulkar on a daily basis was a very big assignment. And I joined Zee when it was in the middle of all kinds of trouble. They just got past this whole, Ketan Parekh episode and ABCL, and we had the JPC sitting on our head. Star was taking the living daylights out of Zee with successes of KBC and Saas Bahu and, whatever. And after 10 years of market leadership, Zee had suddenly gone into the slow track. So I joined Zee. In 100 days, I restaged the Zee general entertainment channel. And GRPs went up by 300% when we relaunched. 300%. Now that naturally had an impact on revenues, it had an impact on, client confidence, it had a huge impact on employee morale. So 2 years at Zee was a very, 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 very diverse experience, very rich experience, and very kind of experience that I think every good marketer should at least once in life go through.
Interesting. And now let's talk about your Dentsu story. How did you sort of come across the opportunity and just sort of walk us through the entire...
Dentsu is a very interesting story. First and foremost, the genesis of it is that for the first time, having worked for an entrepreneur at Zee, as a working professional, you sometimes ask yourself that, in some way, and I think most times is underrated, but in some way, the success of the entrepreneur is because of the contribution of the professionals who work for him. So I said, if I can contribute so significantly to the success of the entrepreneur, and most times contributes what I believe at least significantly to the success of my clients and their businesses, the upside of that success does not accrue to you, right? You're still on a salary.
Absolutely.
So I said, and I was turning 40 and I had some very big job offers as I left Zee. I was a trophy CEO to get. So, lots of big companies, clients I had worked with earlier and so on and so forth, wanted me to come join them. But I had made up my mind. I decided that I am going to give myself a chance to be an entrepreneur. Now, what kind of entrepreneur do you get into? The only thing I knew after now almost, 16, 20, 18 years in the business was advertising and media. So I couldn't go out and suddenly start making, chai patti or selling something else. So the choices were reasonably, Now the lucky, interesting thing was that I used to, in my days at Rediffusion, interact with a gentleman called Fumio Oshima. Mr. Oshima was the global business head of Dentsu. That meant everything outside of Japan reported to him. So in my Rediffusion years, I had great interaction with him across clients from Sony to Canon to Panasonic to, we brought in Honda, which we were looking after in Rediffusion at Everest. So a lot of exposure. So when I quit Zee, I went to meet Mr. Oshima. Now, this whole story is well documented in my book, Konjo.
Okay.
But Mr. Oshima had worked with me and he knew more than anything else that I could be the driver for the Dentsu entry into India. So two things he did for me, for which I am both beholden to him, and for me, he is much more than my mentor. Is one, he could have easily got me to be the CEO of the company. When I pushed, he allowed me to become a joint venture partner. Now, at that point of time, I did not have a company. I did not have an agency. I did not have a single client. I did not have a single employee.
So the first offer he made was for you to become the CEO of the company?
No, he didn't. When I first went to him only, I told him that, Mr. Oshima, I want to be a partner of Dentsu in India. Now, sometimes defining a partner can be 2% sweat equity, and partner could be, 26%, which I was. I mean, they were a multi-billion-dollar company, and I just didn't have the funds to even come close to funding what was initially required as the equity of the company. I mean, Mr. Oshima allowed me 2-3 years to put in my part of the.
How much was the funding requirement, if you want to share that?
Yeah, because I didn't have the money, so I was planning everything on scales which Dentsu was not even used to. So we started the company with 1 crore, so I had to put in 26 lakhs, right? But then very soon we started our second company, which required another 1 crore. So I required another 26 lakhs, and then I had to start a third company, so we required another 26 lakhs, and then we went off to Dubai, where we again needed money. So I mean, these sums may seem small, but you see, I was a working professional. I was well paid, but you don't have that kind of cash lying around. And when you look at it from the perspective of 25 years ago, the benchmarks are different, right? So Mr. Oshima chose me over competitors like Madison. So Sam Balsara was a serious, bidder to get into the process. Most interestingly and the most formidable competitor was Leo Burnett.
Okay.
Leo Burnett in those days still is part of Publicis. And most people now forget, but Dentsu was a significant shareholder in Publicis in those days. So it was like a sister company.
Got it.
And Leo Burnett had set up an agency called Orchard in Bangalore just to handle Toyota. So they had already been handling Toyota for 3 or 4 years. So there was an established, running, satisfactory relationship.
With Toyota.
Yeah. So what Leo Burnett wanted was that Orchard should become 51% Dentsu and 49% continue to be Leo Burnett, and that relationship would flag off the Dentsu relationship in India. There were then a lot of smaller companies. There was a small agency called Capital. There was an agency called Tharan Hoon. There was Triton. They were all handling bits and pieces of Dentsu businesses in India even before Dentsu had come in. But in his wisdom, Mr. Oshima chose to back me to build Dentsu in India. The critical question at that time was build or buy. I said build.
Okay.
The rest of them said buy us, buy us. So my logic was very simple. I mean, the guy who works at, and no offense meant, say at one of these smaller agencies, is not the best professional in Indian advertising. He's in the third, fourth, fifth level of. So you acquire all these third, fourth, fifth level of employees and bring them into a brand that you want to compete with the very best. You're already starting with a disadvantage. I mean, what have you got? You placed business with him. You are saying because he has that business, now I'm going to integrate him into my system. Then you are starting yourself out with a disadvantage. So I built Dentsu from a scratch. I hired the best professionals that were available in this country. I started with Toyota, set up an agency for them in Bangalore, then brought in Honda, set up an agency for them in Delhi, then brought in Suzuki, which is Maruti Suzuki and the bike business and whatever. So we had 3 agencies, and simultaneously we launched Dubai, where we were handling all of Honda, we were handling Daikin, we were handling Hitachi, But parallelly also, I brought in substantial amount of Indian business. Aircel was launching at that point of time.
Okay.
And we got the entire business. All the apparel brands of Raymond's moved to us. We launched HDFC Life, right? Brands like Amrutanyan, Rasna, Bagh Bakri. I mean, a whole lot of large Indian clients also gravitated to Dentsu. In 3 years, we were India's 3rd largest agency.
In 3 years flat.
In 3 years flat. 3 years flat. So, phenomenal rise. I mean, people ask me what was the visible manifestation of that success. So I said on the 1st of January 2008, 1st of January 2008, because I was driving a Mercedes, I felt obligated to my number 2, number 3, number 4, who I thought had contributed even more than I had contributed to the company. And it was a bit of a battle in the boardroom to get it approved, because the board members insisted that the brand I buy would be Japanese. They were already a little worried about the fact that I was driving a Mercedes while we were selling a Toyota. But I managed somehow. And on the 1st of January 2008, I gifted a brand new Mercedes to my head of creative and the heads of the agency that were running Honda and running Toyota.
Who are these individuals?
Gentleman called Gulu Sen, for whom I have the most phenomenal respect. He and I worked together for 25 years. He was also the executive vice chairman of Dentsu and our chief creative officer. And a gentleman called Rajesh Agarwal, who was running the agency that was running the Honda business, and a lady called Ruchira Raina, who was running then the agency that handled Toyota. Nobody in Indian advertising had ever gone and rewarded key talent in quite the same way.
This is unprecedented. I have never heard of it.
I have heard of it because I only followed something that Sunil Mittal had done many years earlier.
Oh, really? Okay, tell us about that.
I mean, I can't remember the whole details, but I think when Bharti Airtel went public, and of course the listing was a phenomenal success.
So he gave it to his employees.
He gave 8 brand new Mercedes to his top 8 employees.
Correct.
So I had taken basically a leaf out of that.
Understood.
So we built an unprecedented success in Dentsu. Toyota Innova were born at Dentsu. Honda City was born at Dentsu. The Honda Activa was born at Dentsu.
So how was the decision to step away from running Dentsu and then sort of move into another role as a chairman? How was that experience?
See, I was India JV partner and I was executive chairman. I mean, apart from the reality of my saying that, they partnered with me and whatever. See, they were a multi-billion-dollar company. I was now a little more affluent than I was when I first invested in the venture. But you see, Dentsu's ambitions ran into millions of dollars. So they were looking at acquisitions. They wanted to participate in buying the IPL rights and doing all kinds of things. So very soon I realized that, while I had built what I had built, my association in that joint venture was not sustainable, not at least beyond a point. Because if they wanted to invest, for example, in the IPL, and I had to veto that in 2008, that meant $1 billion investment. Now, that didn't mean I had to put down $1 billion on the table right then, but I needed to have 260 million in my pocket over the next 10 years. Now, there was no way that I could even imagine that I was ever going to get that kind of money. Right? Now, two choices. Either I participate and then get decimated because I will not be able to, cough up the kind of money I require. Or I raise debt at a personal level and so on and so forth. So complicated. Or I let them invest, in which case I get marginalized. So as Mr. Oshima said to me when I went to him and said, Dentsu's made me an offer I can't refuse, by which time he retired. She said to me, you have friends on the other side. They will make you a fair offer. Take it. So to be fair, Dentsu made me an absolutely fair offer. In fact, a fabulous offer. By the standards of those days, it was a lot of money. I mean, we valued the company at 1,000 crores. I got 260 crores. It's all documented on the net today, so there's not stuff that you need to go looking for. By the standards of those days, it was a lot of money. The only thing was that I agreed, and foolishly now I look back, to a 5-year non-compete. So I remained chairman emeritus, but I could not be in advertising any longer. But that had its own advantages. I mean, I left Dentsu, did two things. One, I thought, while I had done my fair share of education, I had never really studied as I wanted to study, you understand? So I took the CAT exam, actually wrote the paper, got a very, very high, percentile. And I got admission to both IIM Ahmedabad and to FMS. FMS being my alumnus, and therefore my alma mater. And so I decided to go back to FMS.
So you took the CAT exam after
Having sold Dentsu, boss. So in 2011, I took the CAT exam. 2012, I registered for a PhD.
That is absolutely fascinating. So did you?
Yeah. So I sat through 1 year of classes again. I mean, would go every day to class. I wrote 12 exams during that 1 year. Participated in every single class project. I had 100% attendance. I used to fly from Bombay because my family was still here. I would fly from Bombay every Sunday evening and I would come back every Friday evening. And my wife would laugh saying, this is the most expensive PhDs anybody's ever done. I mean, you fly business class to go and attend classes. Right. So I had a beautiful Innova, which I had got converted from DC. So I could go complete 180 degrees. So I was living in Gurgaon. Classes were in North Campus and FMS. So I would go sleeping, come back sleeping. But, I would do a 1 hour trek going, 1 hour coming. But attended every single class and then did a PhD I'm very, very proud of. Very proud of.
This is amazing, actually.
480 pages, thesis.
And what was the thesis on?
The thesis is on celebrities as human brands. I mean, I'm literally quoted in the newspaper every day because celebrities are in the news all the time. And somebody or the other is always looking for a quote. And we've done some really, really mind-blowing work in the area of celebrities. So that I did. And the second thing is I went back to Bharti Airtel and said, boss, you guys have got 300 million subscribers. And why don't you use them to market them to brands? So I opened a completely new genre of advertising in India called mobile advertising. So from 2011 to 2018, I was the exclusive partner of Airtel for monetizing their subscriber bases. And we built a huge business in that domain. Subsequently, I added on Vodafone, added on Idea, added on Reliance, Aircel. So at one point of time, we were monetizing for 800 million subscribers. So,
And this was mostly about all the SMSs.
well, those days,
textures?
the basic things that you had available on 2G and then 3G was basically SMS, then SMS with data link, and then OBDs, outbound dialers.
Yeah.
Of course, there were many other products, but primarily your revenues came from there. But targeted SMSs, so it were not those wild SMSs that you received. But we had access to every data point that was available on a mobile operator. So we used that. So that was a great experience. Finally, in 2018, actually the business we were running became obsolete because 4G came in and apps came in and customers had control on their destination. They didn't require the operator. So I handed the business back to Airtel. They still run it as Airtel Digital, but we got out of it. So that's where the Airtel journey kind of came to an end.
Wonderful, fascinating. I find more fascinating that at certain age, maybe 40 plus, you did your...
Well, I was 48, yeah.
48. Age 48, you did your master's.
Yeah, that's right. You saw, see it here? The PhD degree.
Oh,
you
yeah.
for it at the window?
Yeah, I saw it right over here. Wonderful. Okay. So, Sandeep, moving on, you acquired Rediffusion again in 2021. This time as a owner, you came back in another avatar as a owner, and decades back you were an employee. Can you contrast that, and how has it been in the last few years that you've been as a owner of the company?
So you got to understand, it's always a good feeling. I mean, you were an employee in a company, and now you own the company. But I came back to Rediffusion, not really to advertising, because I have always loved the brand. I told you I worked under Jawan Arun Nanda. He and I had a very special relationship. So Mr. Nanda unfortunately fell very sick. So one day he called me and he said, you need to take over Rediffusion. Now Rediffusion was verging on being a 50-year-old brand. I mean, it had started in 1973 and it was already 48 years old. So he said, perhaps the only guy who understands the brand as well as I do, that is the brand Rediffusion, is you. So I want you to come and make sure the agency stays alive, stays healthy, stays prosperous. And Rediffusion had been through some very bad years. I mean, after the big fallout between Martin Sorrell and Arun Nanda from 2008 to 2021, the journey had been fairly rocky.
What was the fallout about?
Oh, the fallout is a very famous fallout. I mean, as usual, Sorrell wanted to buy Rediffusion. It was not that Mr. Nanda was not amenable to selling Rediffusion, but the price he was offering was not good enough. Now, both of them were very strong personalities. At one point of time, they were good friends. But once the fallout happened, to try and strong arm Mr. Nanda, Martin Sorrell took away the Colgate business. Now, Rediffusion had the Colgate business even before it tied up with Young and Rubicam in 1984. So, the relationship had already been around 25 years. And Y&R and WPP came into the frame much later. But by now, it was like a global account of Y&R. So, Sorrell took that away. It didn't make much of an impact on Arun Nanda. So, then he took away the entire Citibank business.
Achha.
Then he took away the Ford business. Arun Nanda was made of sterner stuff. But then Martin Sorrell hit him with something that even Nanda was not perhaps prepared for, which is that he went and he camped outside the office of Sunil Mittal, sung him all these stories about how now that Mr. Mittal was going global, he needed a global agency. So I don't know how he did it, but he convinced Airtel to move. Now losing Colgate, losing Citibank, losing Ford, losing Airtel, all in the span of maybe a year could have killed any other agency. Killed. And in the process, I mean, don't forget, I had parallelly in Dentsu taken away Maruti Suzuki, I had taken away Sony, I had taken away Canon, whatever, because they were all part of the Dentsu portfolio.
Correct.
So you're hit by the two partners that you brought in to build a stronger agencies. One guy has taken away one set of clients, the other guy has taken away the other set of clients. But as I say, when one door shuts, another door opens. And at that point of time, there was this very famous exit of Vaishnavi PR. There was a lady called Neera Radia.
Oh,
She
yes.
used to run Vaishnavi PR. And then she went into her set of problems. So she was a very good friend of mine. But she went into her set of problems. She was asked by the government to shut her agency. And Arun Nanda and Ratan Tata were very close friends. Very close friends. They had been friends from the days that Arun was close friends with Rajiv Gandhi. So Ratan Tata entrusted the entire PR of the Tata business, which is 130 odd companies, to Mr. Nanda. Mr. Nanda went out and got a global agency called Edelman. And the Edelman Rediffusion combined started to handle 130 companies in PR for the Tatas. So if it had just been the advertising business, maybe the agency would have shut down. But with this new huge influx of, revenue from the PR business, the agency survived and survived.
They sustain themselves.
Yeah. So it had been then 2018, Sorel got kicked out from WPP. And Arun Nanda made the move that I would typically have said was an Arun Nanda move, which is he offered to buy out both Young and Rubicam and Dentsu. So he bought both these partners who had otherwise been actually instrumental in killing the agency. And Rediffusion again became a 100% Indian-owned agency, which I bought then in 2021. So we now own 100% of both Rediffusion and Everest, which is a fully owned subsidiary.
So that's quite a journey, remarkable journey from.
Yeah, and I mean, it's been good fun. I came back to advertising not only for Mr. Nanda and for Rediffusion, but I came back telling myself that, in earlier innings in advertising, I'd worked very hard to keep growing. You should be number one, this and that, whatever. But this time when I came in, I said, I'm going to enjoy advertising. I'm going to enjoy advertising. And even though advertising has become much tougher as a business, but we've done exceedingly well over the last 5 years. Agency has grown quite substantially. We have been profitable every single year ever since I came in. We've gained some fantastic businesses, Taj Hotels, Tata Power, Nippon Mutual, lots of good significant brands. We did 3 years with BMW. And now, most importantly, we built two really, really state-of-the-art businesses. So one is, of course, we are by far market leaders in AI.
Okay.
So in generative AI, we have this aesthetic intelligence lab, AIL, which my daughter now, helms. And we have about 50 clients in that. Last year, we did about 400 videos. And most interestingly, today, we've just started our journey into content in AI. So we've been commissioned for 2 very large series by a leading network, right? And parallelly, we have gotten into a new domain, which is content. So
content creation.
Yeah, content creation. We've just signed a OTT series with a very large platform. So 20-part OTT series. We're also doing a huge amount of work in branded micro dramas. Then we have created some formats of our own, which we are trying to market.
Okay.
So my take is very simple, that brands are going to need content far more in the days to come than campaigns. So we have to make that move forward.
Just elaborate on that. Why do you think brands are going to need content?
Well, you look at it this way. What used to be traditional advertising was you make a film and then it runs on television, or you put it in press and it runs. Today, client monies have got divided into 100 parts. So they're spending money on influencers. So that's one whole thing. is not part of the agency's revenue. Similarly, attention spans are becoming tinier and tinier and tinier. So you're putting money on digital. You're a digital guy, so you understand. But you most times don't even know where the damn thing ran. So it might be performance and it might be programmatic and whatever. But there are times I haven't even seen the campaign that we've released. Now you could turn around and say you're not the cohort, I'm putting it somewhere else and whatever. But that notwithstanding, telling a brand story is becoming more and more difficult. So you have to find vehicles which will be able to carry the brand story to consumers. So that is where the role of content is going to become increasingly important.
Very interesting, and that's absolutely true because as practitioners ourselves, we also realize content is that will carry the message forward in a more immersive, a more emotional way. So Sandeep, you spoke about your best pitch, which was BPL. Can you talk towards the pitch which didn't go as per your expectations, or rather your worst pitch?
Yeah, I'll tell you again a story that is part of my book Konjo. So we were pitching to a Japanese client called Citizen Watches. And it was a Dentsu client, so there was an existing relationship, and the client was in Bangalore. So we asked what time is the presentation, and we'd done some really nice work. I mean, we got some international references from Dentsu, and we knew exactly what had to be done. And the client was, and that's true of most Japanese meetings, I mean, they start early. So meeting was fixed for 9 a.m. And coincidentally, my residence in Bangalore was 5 minutes away from where their office was. So my Japanese colleague came in at about 8:30, and we went off to Citizen. So we were there 8:35. A minute later, the MD came in, and we had a nice conversation. We had some coffee. So everything was set. Except at 8:55, he looked at me and he said, we can start. Now, the reason we couldn't start was that nobody from Team Dentsu, that is the Indian Team Dentsu from Bangalore, was there. So I made some desperate calls, and they said, we are just going to we'll be there soon, which is a typical Indian word for we're running late. At 8:59, he again asked me, can we start? Now, the reason we couldn't start was there was no team. At dot 9 o'clock, the MD stood up and he walked out.
He walked out.
So I asked my Japanese guys, where's he gone? So he looked at the watch. He said, boss, meeting was 9 o'clock. Now, as is usual in India, the first guy trickled in at 9:10, the second guy trickled in at some 9:20. By the time the whole team got together, it was 9:35, 9:40. So I sent the Japanese Dentsu guy. I said, go fetch him. He went out. The MD told him, pitch is over. We're a company that keeps time. For an agency that does not understand the meaning of time, we can't work with you.
Oh.
Global client, easy walk-in, lost because we did not understand the value of time. Similarly, I'll give you another interesting example. I mean, these are Japanese examples. It doesn't mean they're bad guys or we are good guys or that neither of us are good guys. That doesn't really matter. But we just signed. I mean, this is not really the pitch, but the aftermath of a pitch. So we just signed Daikin. And Daikin had just come into India, Delhi account. I had gone, met the client, and then the evening we had taken him out for drinks and, very nice camaraderie, everything. 48 hours later, I'm in Bombay. I get a panic call from my Japanese colleague. I mean, in Dentsu, I had 18 Japanese working for me. So, I mean, on every large account, which was Japanese, we had a set of Japanese client interfaces.
And these Japanese
they were living in
India.
India. So 3 years, 2 years, depending on how many years. Get this panic call, Sandeep-san, I need you in Delhi. You've got big trouble on Daikin. I said, we just started on Daikin. How can we have big trouble? In any case, the guy called, no choice. Next morning, I went to Delhi, went straight to Daikin. Now, what was the issue? The issue was that the guy that we had assigned onto the account, the first day he went to the client, he was wearing a collarless t-shirt with kids. And he was not shaven, looked like a ruffian. So the Japanese MD told the Indian CMO that please tell this guy that this is a workplace and work, etiquette applies. So the Indian CMO told our head of client servicing, who was looking after the account, that please, when you come and see the Japanese MD, please be formally dressed. But in India, we don't understand these things. People tend to ignore signals. So next day, again, because there's a new account, we were meeting the client every day. He again arrived, this time wearing a collared t-shirt, but wearing dirty sneakers. Client called the Japanese interface and said, can't work with you guys. You don't even understand basic office etiquette. So I came in, I had to apologize. I had to, apologize again. I had to,
So what steps did you take to remedy?
No, then we were very clear. I had to be told, boss, this is your jacket, this is your shirt, this is your trouser, this is whatever. Whatever you come in from home. If you are going to the client, you will wear proper shoes and wear proper clothes and wear a proper... Now, the Japanese have also loosened up a little over the years. But even today, you cannot walk into a client's office in dirty sneakers, especially Japanese. But I actually believe that is true for Indian clients also. When we say in advertising, we've got demonetized as an industry, it is because our own people don't take ourselves seriously. I can't think of a McKinsey guy or a BCG guy walking into a client's office without having shaved and, wearing a dirty pair of jeans or, wearing sneakers that stink. Fact of the matter is, what you look like is what you appear to most other people. So if you're dressed at least in what I would say office clothes, that is the least expectation that a client may have from you.
True.
Times have changed. I have this ongoing battle in office also, trying to tell a lot of people that you can't go to a client with your shirt hanging out and they say, no, sir, but nowadays everybody wears it. That's not the point, boss. That's not the point. It's like asking the army guys to now start wearing jeans and wearing, sneakers. There has to be an official dress code. It makes the atmosphere meaningful. Now, when you let your guard down on basic things like that, eventually at some point of time, you will get hit.
Yeah, these tiny things all add up.
They add up. If I'm not saying anything else. This is a Japanese guy. But he comes to work every day wearing a jacket, right? Everybody in his office wears a jacket. Now, just because you say you belong to a creative agency, in Japan, every single creative director will be seen wearing a jacket. A jacket. That is office protocol.
You've been a very successful entrepreneur. When you were managing the Dentsu alliance, did you ever feel like giving up when the pressures were high? What sort of, how did you hold?
I told you 1st January 2008, we were handing out Mercedes, and 9 months later, the entire world collapsed. The crisis of 2008 happened. We lost, I think, 60% revenue. 60% revenue. My biggest clients were all cars and electronics and high-end products. We were not very large in FMCGs. Those products they stopped selling. When they stopped selling, their brand stopped advertising. So suddenly, from having built a company in 3 years to being India number 3, but we might still have been number 3 because everybody else also lost what they had to lose, but we fell off the cliff. So in times like that, you feel tested. But then, I mean, what was happening to us was happening to everybody else around. So the world had no choice to rebuild itself. We were part of that rebuilding. So I don't think, as an entrepreneur, one thing you got to remember, there will be good times and there will be bad times. So much as when the good times are there, you must celebrate. But don't go overboard. At the same time, when the things is not too good, don't get desperate. So you got to take both good and bad in the same, manner.
Got it. What is your advice to when somebody who's 25 years old and beginning their career in media and advertising? What are 3 things you would advise them or tell them?
Their first advice is don't join. This is a dying business. At least advertising is a dying business. At least advertising the way I have known it is a dying business. So the kind of glamour and the kind of, effervescence that advertising had as a profession, say 40 years ago, 30 years ago, is no longer there. So as it is, we've seen that. I mean, there's been a mass exodus of people from advertising to media, and within media from linear to OTT, and now from OTT to digital. So if you still want to join, I think the areas to join are AI, number one, without any doubt. And then the myriad applications that generative AI will have in the development of communication, right? And communication could mean content, it could mean advertising, it could mean one-on-one, it could mean, conversational commerce. The number of application areas that are today available with the coming in of technologies are going to dramatically change. I mean, I was reading about something that Elon Musk put out yesterday, and he said the mobile phone in 5-6 years will cease to exist. You will have an AI node which will talk to the AI node somewhere else, and everything else will happen from there. Eminently possible. Eminently possible. I am telling you, way back, I think 2013 or 14, and Star came up with this idea of launching Hotstar. And nobody knew what an app was all about. So saying that there will be an app which will sit in a mobile phone was an alien idea. And the app was so heavy that we were trying to get it to be downloaded on phones, and it wouldn't work. And that's the time I was running the Airtel business. And we finally found the solution in pre-embedding the app, so the app would at least be there in the phone. But then there were not enough number of phones in this country. The number one guy was Micromax, and there was a bit of Lava and a little bit of Carbon and whatever, where we could even pre-embed the app. Today, you don't even think about it. You don't even blink about it. So, times change. So going back to your question about, a career in media and advertising, not necessarily the most sought after, businesses to be in today. It's like the same thing. I mean, I was talking to some old friends at Nerolac.
But if you look at the industry as such, today, if you look at US as a market or in some of the developed countries, advertising as a percentage of GDP is quite high. Now, as India becomes higher and higher in GDP, that's the correlation.
It's the deployment of that advertising rupee that is going to define what your role is going to be. So if you work for one of the Googles and Metas and whatever, and 7 out of 10 rupees are going there, even there the machine is talking to the machine. It's not talking to a human, right? So if you're lucky to win one of those companies and you're doing, the kind of tech that goes into developing those platforms and the agentic AI and so on and so forth, then maybe it's a good job, right? But if you are in what we call advertising today, or we call media, you're working with NDTV or you're working with Rediffusion, all these jobs are going to be under massive threat. So for somebody coming anew into the business, like I was giving you this example, we just went off. I mean, I was with some old friends at Nerolac. Our biggest problem is not really selling the paint. The problem today is nobody wants to be a painter. It is no longer a glamorous job for the guy who is coming from the village. He's okay being a driver. He's okay being a chef today, a cook, chef. He doesn't want to paint.
We are paint.
So professions go through these changes. So, I mean, the days to come, finding a painter, finding a plumber is going to become as difficult in this country as it has been in the West. because the new crop of people do not aspire for these professions any longer.
Very true.
Interestingly, professions like, for example, a barber has got upgraded. It's become a salon. You understand?
Correct.
The work atmosphere is better. They wear a dress. They look a little more glamorous. So whatever they're doing to their, customers, they do to themselves also a little and whatever.
Yeah.
And they get into nails and they got into tattoos and got into whatever. But certain professions have not grown. So advertising is a profession where a lot of stuff around it has grown, but the core profession itself has lost a lot of its own sheen.
So, how important do you think is selling skills in the world of advertising or winning pitches? What is your role of sales in?
The world's best skill is a selling skill. Yeah, you got to sell yourself every moment. You got to actually sell yourself to your own family. All relationships are basically selling. So to that extent, dependent on the situation and dependent on the point of reference, in some or the other way, you're selling either a product or a concept or an idea or a relationship. So selling is a very important skill. Unfortunately, a lot of what it has got diluted by technology. So, I tell a lot of people in client servicing today that, how come you don't have a face-to-face meeting with a client? Everybody is so happy to have sent a WhatsApp or I messaged him or we'll have a Zoom or whatever. So the human element in sales is coming down and down, and with technology only helping it. Machine is talking to machine. I was reading today that your traffic of the machine in buying today is higher than humans actually buying. So the selling as a technique also is actually going through a metamorphosis. So the selling as you and I understand it or are discussing it is actually not the selling that is actually relevant in the days to come.
Absolutely. And that is why I prefer to have my conversations in person rather than doing a Zoom call or whatever. But Sandeep, on that note, it was wonderful talking to you and thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for coming by, and I hope you have a great podcast, going forward.
Thank you.